Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coming Together as a Community, a supportive education series by the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience at UCCS, Building Resilience After a Tragedy. In the first part of our series here, we're going to start by discussing creating meaningful connections after tragedies. My name is Nicole Weis. I'm the Director of Community Training and Empowerment here at the Institute. I'm also a licensed professional counselor, a licensed addictions counselor, and registered yoga teacher. When we were thinking about this series in response to the Club Q shooting here in Colorado Springs, the first thing we really wanted to start with is this connection piece of how do we really start to reach out and make meaningful connections, have meaningful conversations with the people in our social network. And this is really powerful for a lot of reasons. And ultimately, it comes down to this quote by Helen Keller: "Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much." And I think this really becomes emphasized after community tragedies. Here in Colorado Springs, we have seen an amazing, awe-inspiring outpouring of love and community connections from our professional providers, from community organizations, from just the average person that's wanting to reach out and help one another and really spread that love and support. And this is really what creates what we consider collective efficacy, this idea that we can do this, we can get through this together. So in doing that and in the spirit of that, we really wanted to help break this down and really talk about what does it mean to build a social support network? How might you do that? What are the pieces that are involved? And then when you're ready to reach out and make some really meaningful connections, what might be some easy steps or ways to think about doing that? So in starting this conversation, it can be helpful to think about what is social support? When we think about who's in my social support network or who might I reach out to, why might I reach out to these people? This is what we think about with social support. So there's a lot of different concepts that come in mind. Social support is someone we turn to during stress, during trauma, during tragedies. It's someone that's in our mind that says, I know that this is someone who can support me or who can help me or who can just listen to me. So it's someone to turn to in times of stress. Social support is also a safe space. It's someone who I can be myself with, I can be comfortable with, I can express my emotions or express my fears or my excitements, whatever that might be. And the person I'm speaking with is going to judge me. They're not going to put any expectations on me. They're simply going to provide a space for me. And that is really, really powerful, especially for individuals who might not always have safe spaces. Social support is also a buffer against stress. We're going to talk a little bit in the next slide here about how we can feel better during social support, both by getting and giving support. And social support is emotional or physical help. So it might be somebody that, again, it just allows me to be my emotional, real self, or it might be somebody that can really help me and have tangible assistance if I need it. So I want you to spend just a second. We're going to build into this more during our seminar here, but I want you to think about who's in your corner. When you think of my support network, who is that, right? Who is that for you? When you think, when I'm feeling stressed, this is the person I go to. So I want you to keep those people in your mind as we continue this discussion. Now, there's a lot of benefits of social support. And I think one of the most beautiful things with social support is it's a vicarious relationship, which means we get benefit not only when we give social support to other people, but when we also get social support from other people. So there's this really cool vicarious circle that happens. So research shows us that when we get support from other people, it helps bolster our resilience in stressful situations. We are able to overcome stress, trauma, tragedies a little bit easier, a little bit more thoroughly than if we did not have that support. Research has shown us that one of the number one things we can do to combat stress is to seek out our support network. Now, this is interesting because we tend to do the opposite. We tend to actually isolate and withdraw when we're going through something. So it might take a little bit of proactive energy to say, no, I really want to seek out my support. I need some social support right now. Getting social support also helps reduce our psychological and physiological consequences of stress. Our body literally feels less stress and literally has less consequences of stress when we get support from others. And lastly, it even enhances our immune function, which is amazing, right? The benefits of social support are literally biological. When we get support from others, we increase our immune function. Now, again, this beautiful vicarious relationship happens the other way too, which means when we give support to other people, we inhibit our own stress response. And this leads to increase in our own happiness and a sense of belonging and our own self-esteem and our own self-worth. So we often think about the benefits of getting social support, but it's important to remember too that when we give that support to other people, we're also boosting all of these amazing things in our own body. Now, as I kind of mentioned in the previous slide, there's different types of social support. There's emotional, there's physical support, and it can break down even further than that. So again, I want you to be thinking about who is in your support network. Again, when you're feeling stressed, when you're going through something hard, who are those people that you're turning to? And then I want you to think about what kind of support are they providing you? So there's 5 different types of social support. One is informational. So these are individuals who might give us knowledge or facts, advice, or feedback. There's somebody that you might go to with a question. How do I do this? Why do I do this? How do I get through this? And they're going to give you some of that advice or feedback. There could also be, of course, the emotional social support, which is the one we often think about. This is somebody who expresses caring, concern, empathy, sympathy, somebody that gives us that emotional safe space to be ourselves or to release the kinds of emotions that we're working with. There's also esteem social support. And these are individuals who are going to promote our skills, our abilities, our intrinsic values. They're the individuals who say, I believe in you, you can do this, I'm cheering you on. And then there's our social network support. And these is when we get messages that enhance our sense of belonging, maybe to a community or to an organization. That can feel really, really powerful as well, especially again for those individuals who might not feel a large sense of belonging. And then lastly, there's our tangible social skills, social support. And these are individuals who help physically provide goods or services. So they might help watch your kids if you need some help with that, or they might help cover some bills. They might help with groceries or something, again, that might be simple or small, but provides a tangible support. So again, as you thought about who's in my network, what types of support are they providing you? They might cover all 5 of these. They might only provide 1 or 2. You might go to a different person for each one of these. It can be helpful, though, to think about it. So again, as you're kind of wrapping your head around this idea, start to create a bit of a map. Who is in your corner? Again, when you're feeling stressed and you need someone to turn to, who is that going to be? So you can think about you yourself in the middle here. And then what friends might you reach out to? Who in your chosen family might you seek support from? What about your peers, your neighbors? What organizations or communities might you reach out to for support? Now, this is a really important question, and it might seem really simple. Yeah, I know my friends, I know my family, I know I'm part of these clubs. But why it's so important is multifold. One is because when we're feeling stress, when we're going through something really hard, we often forget or don't think about what has helped us before. So sometimes it can be helpful to reflect, last time I went through that stress, or even right now as I'm going through this stress, these are the people in my corner. These are the people, if it was in the past, these are the people that showed up for me. These are the people who showed that I was a priority for them or I was on their mind. And this, again, is important because the next time you go through stress, remembering these individuals, it makes the brain a little bit easier to remember, oh, hey, I remember Sarah is in my corner. I remember that John was able to help me with this thing. I remember that Becky was able to watch my kids for a little bit so that I could go to a grief group. I remember these individuals who were in my corner. So it's important to ask yourself, who's in my corner? Who can help? Because not only can I reach out to them now, right? I can also potentially reach out to them in the future as well. So it's an important thing to think about. And you can be creative with this map. This might go much, much further, than these 6 little bubbles. We might think about a lot of different people or different organizations you might reach out to, maybe even new ones to try. Again, I think it's amazing and beautiful how many community connections have been outpouring in the last week or so since the Club Q shooting. And so maybe there's some resources, there's some communities, some organizations that you might want to try to reach out to and see if that's helpful, because again, in the next time you go through something, these might be people that can help again. So now that we've created a little bit of your map, think about now, how do we start to create meaningful connections? Sometimes we have what I call kind of a drive-by connection, which is that we try to check in with somebody, we try to be intentional, and we might, at the office one day, or we might see our neighbor or our friend, and we might say, hey, Sarah, how are you? And before Sarah has even really had a chance to dig into how she's really doing, how she's feeling, what she's going through, I'm like past the door. And I thought I was reaching out. I thought I was making a connection, but I wasn't taking enough time to actually stop and listen and ask good questions and be empathetic and validate what's going on in Sarah's life. So I want to break that down a little bit more. The first is understanding the difference between empathy and sympathy. These two terms can get tossed around pretty often, and they're different, and it's important to understand how they're different. Empathy is a skill of understanding someone else's feelings or point of view, and importantly, our ability to understand or communicate that understanding. When we're empathetic, we are literally putting ourselves mentally, emotionally in that other person's situation, and we're trying to understand why they might have a particular feeling. When we can be empathetic towards somebody, it helps that other person feel heard, understood, and importantly, validated in their feelings. Sympathy, on the other hand, while often very, very well-intentioned, ends up being an understanding of another person's point of view from your point of view. And that inherently involves this level of judgment, whether that's intentional or not. And again, oftentimes it is well-intentioned to be sympathetic, but it can end up feeling a little bit judgmental. So I have a quick video clip that I want to share with all my listeners and audience here. And I think it's just a really beautiful way to understand the difference between empathy and sympathy. So this is an illustrated clip from a discussion Brene Brown was having. If you don't know Brene Brown, she's a researcher on shame, and she has a lot of different publications and podcasts about how do we dare greatly? How do we be empathetic towards others? How do we grow our understanding and our love for one another? So I wanted to share again this quick little illustrated clip from one of her talks.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So again, I just love how Brene Brown really demonstrates the difference between that. And I really want to emphasize her last piece there. It's connection that is really important. So sometimes, even if we have no idea what to say, simply being in that space with somebody and saying, I'm willing to be here with you, can be really, really powerful for the other person. So thinking about empathy, it can be really powerful. Empathy helps us communicate a shared understanding without having to use a whole lot of words. And it also helps move the conversation towards help or support. It can help deepen our relationships and promote some helping behaviors. It instills compassion, understanding in times of stress. And it can be hard. It can be painful at times. So it's important to recognize that if you tend to be a very empathetic person, or you're really working on displaying some empathy for those around you, being careful to take care of yourself as well. Because when you're empathetic, you're giving a little piece of yourself to the other person. And so you have to be aware of how much you're giving so that you're protected as well. And we're going to talk about that at the very end here too. Now, validation, when we think about empathy and validation is when we verbally communicate that empathy and that understanding of the other person's point of view, their experience, and helping to understand that. So you can validate and accept a situation without approving of the situation or the behavior. So it simply says, I hear you. I understand why you might feel this way. I believe in you when you say this. When we listen without judgment, it helps us provide that safe space for someone to express their emotions, and ultimately helps us lead to a better discussion of support and change versus forcing this issue without validating the experience. It can also help us move to the point of help and support for that person. Because when we empathize and validate first, we help build that trust to say, again, I am someone who's willing to be here with you. When you're ready, I might have some resources or support or advice to give. But first, I'm going to just help you feel safe. So I have another quick short video here about this concept of it's not about the nail. It's not about the situation. It's about how the person feels in that situation. So again, another quick little video here.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't.
So of course, there's a little bit of humor in that video, but the point is what that woman was looking for was just empathy and understanding that right now the nail is painful and there's consequences and there's repercussions to having this nail. And he's thinking, we'll just take the nail out, but it's not always that simple. Maybe she doesn't know the nail's there. Maybe she knows the nail's there, but there's no resources to get the nail out. Maybe she knows that if she gets the nail out, more consequences are going to come. And so for now, keeping the nail in is the best, safest thing she can do. Maybe she's scared to pull the nail out and she needs more trust and safety before she can do that. So there's a lot of different situations, of course, that is the nail. And sometimes, especially as helpers, and especially because we care, we want to say, let me just solve the problem. Let me just take the nail out. Let me just point that out to you. Do you know that your whole life would be easier and all of this would be solved if you got the nail out of your head? But it's not about the nail. It's about how she feels about the nail. And maybe eventually, after we empathize and we validate and we build that relationship, we can get to the point to say, hey, did you know there's a nail in your head? And maybe if we can get you the support and the resources to get that nail out, you'll feel better. So eventually we might be able to approach that topic. But first, we just want to empathize. We just want to say, I hear you. I see you. It must be really hard. I get you. We want to empathize and validate first, because it's ultimately not about the nail. Now, as we've talked about empathy and sympathy and validation, we now want to move into how do you create some of those connections. So ultimately, what we want to be doing is slowing down, and we want to honor the hard, and we want to ask about the good. So by doing this, by slowing down, we're saying, you are a priority for me. I want to spend the time to understand what you're going through, where you're coming from. This is, again, getting rid of those kind of drive-by conversations where Sarah checks in with us and we really listen to what Sarah has to say. And then we want to honor the hard. We can sometimes get into this point of frame of, let's just focus on the positive. Let's just focus on what's going well. And again, very well intentioned, but it invalidates the hard when we do that. So we want to hold space for the hard. We want to listen. We want to respect it. We want to empathize and validate the hard, especially after tragedy, because it's hard right now. And it might be hard for a little while. And then importantly, we want to start asking about the good. Now, this isn't that toxic positivity that says, I don't care about the hard. We're only going to focus on the good. I want to hold space for both. What can sometimes happen when we get together, especially after stress and trauma and tragedy, is we get into what I call these negativity spirals. That I might share what's hard in my life, and then the person I'm talking to shares what's hard in their life, and then I come back and share what's hard in my life, and then they go back to share what's hard in their life. And we just start to spiral into this negativity. And before long, we both feel worse. And often well-intentioned, we're trying to hold space for that hard, but it can be really helpful if we start to pull out of that spiral and we say, I hear the hard. Now let's think about the good. Let's think about the strengths. Let's think about the resilience that can come from this. And I'll go into a little bit more of that. But ultimately, we want to hold space for both, because both are really, really true for us. So one of the programs here at the Lyda Hill Institute is GRIT, Greater Resilience Information Toolkit. And we created that here at the Institute in response to COVID. And what it is, it's a free 2.5-hour online training that anybody can take to really help build those connections in our social network. Social networks is one of the only untapped resources when it comes to stress and trauma. And we are much more likely to reach out to our friends and family first before we tend to reach out to professional connections. And so GRIT helps anybody in the community learn how to reach out and make some of those connections and start to point towards resources and support. And we break this into 5 steps. So I'm going to give you a little sneak peek here, a little taste of GRIT and the 5 steps of GRIT. So the first step is we want to make contact. And what this means is we want to intentionally, proactively, most likely reach out to somebody in our network. And oftentimes it's because you're thinking of them for a particular reason, right? Maybe they belong to, in response to the Club Q shooting, maybe they belong to the LGBTQIA plus population and community. And so they're on your mind already. Maybe they were working in the hospital when the event went down. And so again, they're on your mind. There could be 100 different reasons why you're thinking of this person during stress, trauma, or tragedy. So we want to proactively, intentionally reach out and to say, again, keep using this Sarah person. Sarah, I'm thinking of you. And I want to check in with you because X, Y, Z. Or simply, I notice you and I want to spend some time checking in with you. And then importantly, we want to ask permission. We want to say, is this a good time to talk about this? Do you want to talk about this? Are you ready to talk about this? Am I a person you are okay talking about this with? Because maybe I'm a supervisor, or maybe I don't belong to that community. And so there's a little bit of inherent lack of trust in that conversation. Again, 100 different reasons why somebody might not be comfortable. So we want to proactively reach out, and then we want to ask permission. Is it okay? Am I okay to have this conversation with you? And then we want to ask intentional, good questions about feelings, distress, and well-being. So not just how are you? How are you really doing? How are you coping? What are you working with right now? How have you been thinking about the situation right now? What are you doing to make yourself feel about this situation right now? So a lot of different questions, but we want to be really intentional and ask about feelings, distress, and well-being. And then we want to start listening for and identifying strengths and resilience. So this is again where we respect and honor the hard and asking about those questions, empathizing, validating, being in that space, and then starting to pull out of that spiral and noticing and helping the other person notice strengths and resilience. And then we want to add to those strengths when we can. So we might say, I notice, despite all the stress, you're doing yoga every day. And that's amazing. You're moving your body in a really intentional way and you're engaging in some, mindful relaxation. And I really want to just point that out, that I notice you're doing this really strong, resilient behavior. And I wonder if you're able to put that energy towards yoga, could you also put some of that energy into calling some friends and family and really strengthening your relationships right now? We're going to get into a little bit more of that next. And then lastly, we want to summarize. We want to say, this is what I heard you say. Did I get that right? Did I miss anything? Is there anything else important? And then this is when we can start to provide those resources. Now that I've listened and I've validated and we've talked about what's both hard and what might be going okay or well, now I can also say, hey, I wonder, have you thought about reaching out to this group? Have you thought about checking in for some of those pro bono therapy services that are available right now? Have you thought about attending any of these community events? So we can start to provide those resources because we have built a little bit of that safe space first. So some of those resilient strength behaviors we might point out or listen for is these social connections and support the individual might have or is needing. It might be positive or mood improving activities. This is one of my favorite ones. We can simply ask, what brought you joy today? In the middle of all of this stress and trauma, did anything make you smile today, even just for a second? When our brain can focus on some of the good, it doesn't feel so overwhelmed with all the bad. Our brain is a pattern maker. We're always looking for patterns in our environment. And when everything is hard, the brain starts to look for all the hard things. So when we help break that pattern and we say, I know it's hard, and man, my dog was in a goofy mood this morning. And man, the way my kids looked at me today over breakfast, or the way the snow is falling right now. It's a moment, it's a 30 seconds of joy, but it helps break the pattern. So these are really helpful questions to ask and great questions to ask for yourself as well. It's also important to think about, what are we putting in our body? What are we eating? What are we drinking throughout the day so that our body feels nourished? And how are we sleeping? Which is one of the very first things to go. And when it comes to stress, is the person you're talking to sleeping well? Is their sleep disrupted? Are they oversleeping, undersleeping? And these are some resources you might be able to provide. Are they moving their body in any intentional way? Again, maybe yoga or going for a walk, maybe running or really, doing some adrenaline movement, but are they moving their body? And then lastly, are they finding ways to relax their mind and their body? So both physically, emotionally, mentally, are they finding some space to relax? So again, just a quick little snippet of what we talk about in the GRIT program, which again is free. It's about 2.5 hours and anyone in the community can sign up for it. But these are things to think about during your conversations because they can be really helpful to point out for somebody and to provide some support and resources around. Lastly, when we talk about making these meaningful connections, it's really important to think about, are you modeling that behavior and walking the talk, taking care of yourself too? So if we're encouraging the person we're talking to reach out to their social networks, if we're encouraging them to check into the resources that are around them or go to these community events or talk to a therapist, are these things that you're considering for yourself as well? Right? And again, because empathy can be painful sometimes because we hold so much space for somebody, it's important that we're taking care of ourselves too, so that we can continue to be there for other people. It's the whole analogy of you can't fill from an empty pitcher, you can't charge with an empty battery. So think about for yourself as well. And again, remember, both giving and getting support helps benefit us. So if you're giving support, but you're feeling tapped, be sure to get some of that support for yourself too. So as we kind of wrap up this first of 4 in our education series here, I hope it's been helpful. I hope you feel empowered to go out and make some meaningful connections and simply start checking in with people. Sometimes after stress and trauma, especially community tragedies, we can sometimes leave it to the professionals because, at the end of the day, who am I to provide support? And I'm here to say you are everything. You're everything for somebody. So reach out, say, I'm here, even if all I can do is provide the space for you. Be together, because the power of connection is more than almost anything else we can provide. So be together, support one another. We will overcome this. And it's hard right now, and it's okay to honor and have space for the hard while we hope for the better. So go forth, support. Please feel free to contact us for any needs or questions. We are here for the community in a variety of ways. You have my email here, nweiss@uccs.edu. If you want to look at any of our other programs, you can check us out at resilience.uccs.edu. And if you're interested in that free GRIT program, you can get into that at grit.uccs.edu. Thank you sincerely from the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience here at UCCS, and we hope to see you next time.